next, among the Vedic traditions, we will see the yoga. This is a very famous tradition, but for different reasons. But here we will try to understand certain philosophical principles of the yoga tradition. Just like the Sankhya tradition, this also has some rishi who has systematized the tenets of yoga. That person or rishi is called Patanjali. In his Yoga Sutras, he has systematized the Yoga Darshana. It serves as a methodology to realize the difference between Prakriti and Purusha. So, if you remember the short lecture on Sankhya, the Purusha is liberated when the distinction between Prakriti and Purusha dawns upon the Purusha. How to do that? What are the practical ways in which we can get to that position? Yoga sets out the methodology or the practical steps. So, it elaborately establishes the necessary practices an individual needs to inculcate in themselves in order to reach that state where the distinction is clear to them. And it does so by emphasizing on the understanding the true nature of the chitta and what are its various states, what are its various cognitive activities, and what are the various methods to control it. The definition of yoga is very clear. In the second sutra of the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali sets out what yoga is. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So, it is the cessation of all mental modifications. This is how yoga defines itself. So, the idea which is clear in this definition is to calm the mind to such an extent that it is able to see very clearly the distinction between the Prakriti and Purusha. So, how does this do this? How does it calm the mental activities to such an extent? It does so by a simultaneous progress in one's physical being, in one's psychological being, as well as in one moral being. So, this is how it tries to bring about a change or transformation in all the three aspects, so that it can go to the state where the Kaivalya Jnana is available. But towards what entity does, or towards what state does this process lead to? To a state where there is a single pointed concentration of the chitta towards the Purusha or some such entity that it has captured in its mind. Eventually, what is supposed to happen is that the chitta is supposed to be completely stopped, and the Purusha is supposed to shine in its own light. So, the idea is to use mind, like they say, we have to remove a thorn with a thorn. So, here also the chitta is used as a ladder to reach a state where the chitta is no longer existing. And how does it do this? How can we go to the state where we have a single pointed focus of some entity? This is the very famous Ashtanga Marga, or the 8 steps of yoga. Among this, the first step is Yama, or some sort of forbearance. So, the 5 yamas are very famous: Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Aparigraha, and Brahmacharya. So, non-violence, truth telling, not being greedy, not being after accumulating wealth, and to maintain distance, or let us say not to indulge in sexual activity beyond certain, whatever is necessary. So, Brahmacharya does not mean complete abstinence or something like that, but to only for procreation, or to in a regulated way indulging in such activities. So, these are some of the negative commands that you have: don't do this, don't do this, or for example, don't indulge in violence, don't indulge in lying, don't indulge in greed. So, it is a set of 5 don'ts: don't. But after this, you have a set of positive commands called niyama. So, these are certain positive commands. So, what are these positive steps that are taken? Shaucha, which is cleanliness, to keep the body and also mind clean. The second one is tapas, which means we have to be neutral to hot and cold. So, please understand, when a yogi is trying to sit and meditate, suddenly if the temperature drops or the temperature increases, that person cannot complain saying that, oh no, it is getting too hot, I cannot meditate in this room. So, the idea is to get the body and the mind to such a state that it is neutral to all the extremities of hot and cold, etc., so that it can. So, that is called tapas. So, the end product of tapas is that our body becomes accustomed to the various extremities of weather and all these things, hunger, etc. No, after 1 o'clock I am hungry, I cannot do meditation after 1 o'clock. These kinds of things the yogi cannot say. So, that is what the tapas helps the yogi in doing. It makes the yogi balanced in all of these states. So, the first one was Saucha. which is cleanliness. The second one was tapas. The third one is swadhyaya, that is they have to continuously read the Vedic texts and the various shastras they have to read. The fourth one is Ishvara Pranidhana, which is the devotion to Ishvara. The yoga has a very peculiar definition or understanding of Ishvara. Here Ishvara is not understood like this all-seeing, all-controlling entity like we have the Puranic gods, but this is seen as a teacher. If you dedicate yourself, or if you can focus on this teacher, or that is Ishvara, that Ishvara will take you sooner to the path of samadhi, or that state where the mind is calm. So that is the idea of Ishvara that they have. And the last one is Santosha. This is not in any particular order that I am saying. So if you want it in the traditional order that it is recited, it is Shaucha, Santosha, Tapa, Swadhyaya and Ishvara Pranidhana. So Santosha is contentment. So please understand, contentment is different from happiness. Happiness you can always have more, okay. If you have something which is a very tasty thing, it can be even more tastier and you can get even more happy. Whereas Santosha is contentment. Once you are content, you can't be more content. So there is nothing called more content. So you have to develop the disposition of being content. So the first five, the yama, were a set of 5 don'ts. Don't. This niyama is a set of do's. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. So this is a set of do's. So the first one was negative commands, let us say. The second one can be seen as positive commands. After this, there is the asana, which is now the most famous step. Everyone equates yoga with asana. This is physical posture. Believe it or not, the Yoga Sutra devotes only one sutra to this thing called asana. It just says that in one sutra it gives the definition sthira sukha asanam. So that's all. Whatever is stable and is comfortable, that is called asana. That is all it says about asana. But now this is the most famous aspect of yoga. So this is supposed to inculcate certain physical fitness into the yogi, such that they are able to go to the further steps. So asana is not the end of yoga, it is one of the means, in fact one of the early means of getting the final step. So the next one is pranayama, which also is very famous. So controlling or regulating the breath. Now please understand what yoga is trying to do. It is trying to calm the mind to such an extent that it is able to see the distinction between Prakriti and Purusha. One of the most easiest tricks to calm the mind is to focus on breath. So whenever you are having too many thoughts, if any of you have the practice of meditating and so many thoughts keep coming into your mind and you want to, it is inevitable, and if you want to focus your mind, the easiest trick to do that is to focus on our breath, whether I am breathing in or whether I am breathing out. How long am I breathing in? How long am I breathing out? So if you just focus on the breath, the mind becomes much more focused, or the activities nullify or come down. The number of mental thoughts that we have come down if we focus on the breath. So here the idea is to control the breath to an extent that even that is calmed. After this, the step is called pratyahara, which is to withdraw the senses back into some internal organ. So as you remember the Katha Upanishad, the mantra that I had said, the senses have the disposition to go out. So the yogi sitting in meditation, he is able to hear the birds chirping outside, some person is shouting and selling mangoes outside, etc. The senses always are going out. But in the pratyahara, what happens is that the yogi tries to get the senses back in and focus inside. So that is called pratyahara. Despite what the name says, it has nothing to do with ahara, nothing to do with eating. It is withdrawing the senses from outside world to the inside world. Now these 5 steps are called Bahiranga Prayoga or Bahiranga Yoga because they focus on the externalities. Till now we have not gotten actually to regulate our mind. We have not yet come there. So all of these are preparatory steps in order to go to the next 3 steps, which are called the Antaranga Prayoga or Antaranga Yoga. The first of this is called Dharana. That is, in order you fix upon a entity, mostly a mental entity, a mental image of your bridge of your nose or the tip of your nose, something like that. You make a mental image of that and you focus your thoughts only on that entity. That is called Dharana. After this comes the step called Dhyana, which is the continuous flow of thought, uninterrupted flow of thoughts towards that entity that you have made up in your mind. So in dharana, you are just beginning to contemplate on that entity, whereas in dhyana, when it happens, you are continuously, without any interruption, you are able to focus your mind on that thing. When this is successfully taken to an extent, you reach the level called samadhi, which is supposed to be the state of yoga, where there is a oneness between the object and the thought. So, and after a while there is no thought also, there is only the Purusha that shines in its own light. So, in dharana you are able to unceasingly direct your attention or focus or cognitive activity towards that thought, and then in samadhi the self becomes one with that object, and eventually that object also disappears and only the Purusha remains. First 5 are Bahiranga and the last 3 are Antaranga yoga. Now, because this yoga has all of these benefits, it transforms our psychological being, it transforms our moral being, it transforms our physical being also. A lot of useful byproducts people are seeing. For example, people use it to relieve themselves of stress or something like that. They go on some yoga retreat or something like that. They go to calm the stress in their life, to live a better life, to increase the well-being that they have, psychological well-being that they have. But what we have to understand is yoga is much more than that. It is a way of life. It is not just asana and pranayama that is most famous over here. A lot of moral and psychological changes also happen if we do all the 8 steps. In fact, if we do all the first 5 steps the Bahiranga yoga prescribes itself, there will be a lot of change in us and way in which we carry out our life. It has a grand purpose of realizing the true nature of the jiva. And the purpose is to liberate oneself from the limitations of the mundane existence. So, it is not that I have gone to the yoga retreat, now I am stress free, I can now come back to office and take on more stress. So, that is not the idea of yoga. Most of us are employed, so we cannot escape it. You have one semester, after that you have another semester. So, even if you take a break and do yoga, you have to come back and write the exam. But the ultimate purpose of yoga, at least as we have in the tradition, is to liberate the self from this cycle of mundane existence that we have. So, rather than looking at yoga as simply as asana or pranayama, etc., please understand that it has a much larger metaphysical purpose of knowing the true nature of oneself and escaping or finding ultimate happiness and not just short-lived happiness for 15 days in the yoga retreat.